In October of 1974, Al Green was the best-selling soul singer in America. He had sold out arenas in 7 consecutive cities. Let's Stay Together had spent 9 weeks at number 1. He was 33 years old, at the precise center of what a career in American popular music looks like when everything is working. By the following spring, he had told his label he was done. He was standing behind a pulpit in a converted church building on Hale Road in Memphis, Tennessee, preaching to 40 people on a Sunday morning. What happened between those 2 moments was not a career decision. Evelyn Price was 31 years old and had been a registered nurse at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis for 6 years when they brought Al Green in on the night of October 18, 1974. She was working the night shift, the shift that receives the city at its most exposed, when the structures of ordinary life have come down and people arrive with whatever the dark has done to them. She had treated burns before, occupational injuries, kitchen accidents, the particular emergencies that present themselves in the hours when the rest of the city is asleep. She had the professional competence of a person who has learned, over 6 years of emergency medicine, to do her work in the presence of things that would stop most people from functioning at all. She prepared the room. She began the intake. She was doing what she was trained to do, but she was paying attention to something that the intake form did not ask about. Because in the hours after Al Green arrived at Baptist Memorial, what he was not doing was telling anyone to call his manager. Albert Leorns Green was born on April 13, 1946, in Forest City, Arkansas, the 6th of 10 children of Robert Green, a sharecropper and church deacon, who moved the family to Grand Rapids, Michigan, when Albert was 9 years old. He sang in the family gospel group from the time he could stand at a microphone. The Green Brothers, performing at churches and community events across the Midwest. Gospel music was not entertainment in his father's house. It was service. It had terms, and it had a purpose, and the purpose was not commercial. His father removed him from the family group at 16 for listening to Jackie Wilson records. The charge was secular contamination. Albert accepted the charge and went into secular music anyway because the voice had found a direction, and that direction was not going to be reversed by parental authority, even at 16, even in his father's house. He spent the late 1,960 seconds working the rhythm and blues circuit, small labels, club dates, the particular education that a working musician accumulates through repetition in front of audiences who are not obligated to be patient. The records he made in that period did not break through. He was building something without yet knowing what shape it was going to take. The shape arrived in 1969 in the form of Willie Mitchell. Mitchell was a Memphis band leader and high records producer who had spent a decade developing a particular sound, quieter than what Stax was producing across town, more intimate, built around the principle that a great voice deserves a great room, and that the producer's job is to build the room correctly and then get out of the voice's way. He heard Al Green at a club date in Midland, Texas in 1969. He recognized what he was hearing and brought him to Memphis, to the Royal Studios on Union Avenue. What they made together over the next 5 years stands as one of the most sustained achievements in the history of American soul music. Tired of being alone in 1971, Let's Stay Together in 1972, 9 weeks at number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts. I'm Still in Love with You, Call Me, Here I Am. Each record a demonstration of the same quality, a voice that could hold tenderness and urgency simultaneously. that could make a listener feel both chosen and accompanied, that found the place in a person's chest that most music approaches and then misses. He was playing 300 dates a year. He was on the covers of magazines. He had become the specific kind of famous that changes the texture of everyday life in ways that the work of becoming famous does not prepare you for. The complications that came with that life were not entirely professional. There had been a relationship with a woman named Mary Woodson. She had wanted something from it that he had not provided. The gap between her expectations and what he was offering had accumulated. The weight of things said and things not said, commitments implied and never formalized. She had been calling. He had not always called back. On the evening of October 18th, 1974, she came to his home in Memphis. He was in the bathroom. She entered the house. She had heated a pot of grits on his stove. What happened in the next few seconds left Al Green with second- and third-degree burns across his back and torso. Mary Woodson went to another room. She did not survive the night. Evelyn was in the emergency room when he arrived. The burns were serious enough to require extended hospitalization, the kind of physical recovery that takes weeks and keeps the body occupied while the mind is left with nothing to attend to except the questions it has been successfully avoiding. She moved through her work with the efficiency of someone who has learned to live in the clinical facts and trust them to be sufficient. But she was noticing something. Al Green, in the hours after his admission, was not making the calls that a person in his position would need to make. He was not asking about the tour. He was not coordinating with management. He was asking about Mary Woodson. He received the answer. Then he was very quiet. Evelyn had seen, in 6 years of night shifts, the full range of what a crisis does to a person's face. She had learned to distinguish between the quiet of shock, which is involuntary, which is the body protecting itself from information it cannot process, and a different kind of quiet, the quiet of a person who has processed something and arrived somewhere. The two look similar from a doorway. They are not the same. What she was looking at in Al Green's room, in the hours after midnight on October 18th, was not shock. It was arrival. The church had never entirely left him. His father's gospel framework, the specific quality of music made in service of something beyond itself, had stayed in the voice all along. It was audible on the High Records albums to anyone who knew what to listen for, something in the upper register, a quality in certain phrases that listeners consistently described as spiritual without being able to explain precisely why. He had left the church at 16 and carried it with him through 15 years of secular music without, perhaps, fully understanding that he was carrying it. During the weeks of his recovery, he read, he prayed, he spoke with ministers who came to visit. He had the specific kind of reckoning that is only available when the structures that ordinarily manage a life's open questions have been interrupted so completely that the questions can no longer be deferred. The conclusions he reached in that room were not sudden. They were the conclusions of a man who had been approaching them for years, from a direction that had now been interrupted. The interruption had taken away the last remaining obstacle to arriving. He told Willie Mitchell. He told the people at High Records. He was not stopping music. He was returning it to its source. He had already purchased a former church building in the Whitehaven neighborhood of Memphis on Hale Road. He intended to open it as the full Gospel Tabernacle. He would pastor it. He would record gospel music. The secular catalog, the 5 years of High Records work, the hit singles, the sold-out arenas, was complete. It was not going to be extended. The music industry responded the way it always responds when a commercially successful artist makes a decision that is not commercially motivated. A period of attempted renegotiation followed by acceptance. His contractual obligations were resolved. Willie Mitchell continued working with other artists.
Al Green's position in the machinery of American popular music was vacated, as positions always are, and filled by other things, because the machinery does not stop for individual decisions. He released gospel albums through the late 1970s and 80s. The Lord Will Make a Way, in 1980, won a Grammy for Best Soul Gospel Performance. The voice on these records was the same voice, the same range, the same movement between registers, the same quality that had made the High Records albums what they were. The church had always been in the music. He had gone back to where it came from. Evelyn left Baptist Memorial in '83. She spent a decade in home health nursing and then retired. She kept the story of that night the way certain experiences get kept. Not displayed, not routinely told, but present, part of the permanent inventory of what she understood from 2 decades of medical work. Most patients from that period she could not have described in detail at any distance. She could describe Al Green in detail. Not because she had been a devoted follower of his music, she knew the records and respected them, but because of what she saw in the room between midnight and dawn on October 18, 1974. She said, when she eventually told the story to her daughter, "I have seen many people come through a crisis. Most of them want to know how bad it is and what comes next. The ones who don't ask those questions, who ask other questions or ask nothing at all, they're usually the ones who already know what comes next. They've worked it out before you've had a chance to tell them." I don't know what he decided in that room. I know the deciding was already done when he came through the door. Full Gospel Tabernacle Church is still open on Hale Road in Memphis, Tennessee. He has pastored it for more than 50 years. He has returned to the concert stage on occasion, has performed the secular catalog at tribute events, has allowed the High Records recordings to be heard in contexts that acknowledge what they were. He has never suggested those records were wrong. He has also never returned to them as his primary work. Someone asked him, in an interview many years later, whether he regretted leaving secular music at the height of his commercial success. He said he didn't think of it as leaving. He said the music had taken him as far in one direction as it was going to take him. Then it was time to go the other way. Not the 9 weeks at #1, not the sold-out arenas, the 40 people in the pews on a Sunday morning on Hale Road, which is where The Voice, if you listen to the High Records albums with the right kind of attention, had always been going. Subscribe to Untold Soul Legends. Every week we find the moments behind the music that changed everything. The comment section is open. Tell us which Soul Legends story you want to hear next. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who needed to hear it today.